Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of the book of Mark. Today we're in Mark chapter 1, verses 23 through 45. And as we examine these verses this morning, I want us to notice some things about how Jesus is interacting with people in the context of his early ministry. So I picked out a couple different things that are interesting, but also some things that help tell us the process that Jesus is utilizing in order to be able to reach out to those around him. Let's look at a few things. First of all, in the first few verses of our text, you have Jesus healing several different people. And you have Jesus healing people from very different backgrounds and of very different types. You have the individual who walks into the synagogue, who he is going to send the unclean spirits out of. You have Peter's mother in law who is sick. You have a leper at the end of the chapter who is going to be healed. But in each of these instances, there are things that are very important for us to understand. No, number one, these were people that were known in the community around them. And these were ones that they publicly acknowledged. They would know publicly that these were ailments, and these ailments were not some internal ailments that nobody could see, but rather these were public ailments. These were ones that were readily noticeable. Things like the leper with his leprosy would be something that would be noticeable. The ones with the unclean spirits, the ones who are sick in all of these different areas. And as you go through the chapter, all of the people around the city begin to bring him those who are sick and those who are infirmed, and he heals them. So this isn't just some traveling medicine show where somebody shows up and they've got a couple of people with them that nobody has ever seen before who have these mysterious ailments that nobody can verify. No, this is something very different. And it is immediately noticeable and immediately understood to those who are listening and watching and seeing what is going on. And so Jesus is going to heal these people in a public way, but he's also going to heal those in a private setting as well, such as you see with Peter's mother-in-law. Peter's mother-in-law is not healed in any way publicly, but rather simply out of compassion in a private sense of the things that she is dealing with her fevers. But Jesus is not just doing this because he can do it. There is a purpose behind it, and I want us to look at that in just a couple of moments. But before we do, there is something else here at the end of chapter 1 that is very important for us to see. And that is down in verse 35, where it says, "In the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed." Over the course of Jesus' ministry, during the days, he is going to be inundated with people from every side. There's going to be very little time that he is going to be able to spend by himself. So, what Jesus does is he makes the time before dawn to go out to have a solitary place to go pray. There is an enormous lesson here for us. That if it was important for Jesus to find time, to find a solitary place, to find an opening to pray, and to have that meditative time, that preparative time for the day, to be able to get things in order, and to be able to spend time with the Father, it's just as important for us. And it is necessary for us to do the same thing. We live in extremely hectic and extremely busy lives. And even in the midst of pandemic and everything else, we live in circumstances and in situations that are increasingly more busy. But in the midst of all of that, we have to make sure that we make the time, whatever it takes to be able to do that, that we make the time to be able to have the opportunity to pray and to be able to have the opportunity to prepare our hearts, to prepare our minds, to take care of ourselves for the day. Peter comes running and looking for Jesus, and he says, everyone is looking for you. And there was a reason why they couldn't find him. There are times where it is important to simply be alone with an individual's prayers and with an individual's thoughts and perspectives in trying to get everything laid out and taken care of, and to have the relationship with God that an individual needs to have. Jesus illustrates here the importance of finding a solitary place, a peaceful place, a place where you're alone to be able to do what you need to do. But then a final thing from the chapter. At the end of the chapter, you have the healing of the leper. And Jesus is going to make a very interesting statement here at the end of the chapter in verse 44. He says to the leper after he's healed him, he says, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priests, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony of them." He is going to cleanse the leper, and yet at the same time he's going to tell him, don't tell anybody. And yet this is not going to make a lot of sense, because he's already healing people, he's already going through and doing these things, so it's not like he's been doing these things in secret thus far. What's the point? What's the reason behind it? And I think the reason is actually found in verse 45. He is starting to go around preaching and teaching and all of those things. And while he's doing these healings, they have a purpose behind them. In this case, the healing was out of compassion. He saw this man comes running up to him, he's asking him for help, and Jesus has compassion on him and heal him. But the general purpose of the things that Jesus is doing is to prove that the words that he's saying are true. To prove that he is who he's going to claim to be, and that he is working by the power of God. But then you have verse 45, and the man, as most any of us would given the circumstances, goes out and he begins to proclaim to everybody the things that have taken place and the things that have been done. And sure enough, what happens in verse 45 is that Jesus can no longer openly enter the city. Because the moment he does, he is completely bombarded by everyone around him. And you can't move, he can't speak, he has all of these different things that are going on, and the purpose is lost. So what Jesus has to do is Jesus has to go outside into the deserted places. And here it's not an idea of desert as we normally think, but rather places where nobody is. And they come to him from every direction. They're following him wherever he goes. Jesus asking the leper not to tell anyone is not because Jesus doesn't want anyone to know, or that he's ashamed of having helped the leper, or that it's somehow this big secret. But rather it was trying to keep control of his mission and his purpose, and being able to set the tone and set the pattern for how he is presented to people. That's not going to function in this sense at this point the way he desired. But Jesus will make the most of it. These are the things that I notice in the last half of Mark chapter 1. I know that there's several other things we could spend more time on in this regard, but I hope that these things have been beneficial to you. Next time we will come back and we will begin looking at Mark chapter 2. I hope you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.